what we'll be covering today is the definition of predatory publishing, also how they target scholars, the characteristics of predatory versus non-predatory journals, the impact of predatory journals, and tools for evaluating the journals around the world. You can use these tools to evaluate a journal and determine whether it's safe or not. So let's define predatory publishing. It's a term coined by Jeffrey Beal. And that was in 2010. And it refers to the practice of charging fees. So if authors want to publish an article, they'll charge a fee and then publish it without using standard editorial review services, peer review and editorial services that you would expect to see in a legitimate scholarly journal. So there's a pretense that these are peer reviewed and edited properly, but they're not. This applies to journals and also to conferences. There are fake conferences as well. The predatory publishers have taken advantage of the open access movement. So they tend to charge an author publishing fees. And traditionally, published journals could still be predatory. This type of journal is different. It's not, I don't mean low quality journal when I say this, there's a distinction. But even though it's true that they don't need the high standards of peer review, but the goal there is to fool the authors. The characteristics of a predatory publisher. If an article is accepted quickly, like in a few days, that's unusual. The process is ordinarily several months before an article is accepted. And they tell you about the publishing fees only after the paper has been accepted. They use ISSN numbers and they invent fake impact scores. They also solicit submissions, articles from authors, from you, through email. Another thing that they do is they publish the article and they charge you. And then if you ask them to take it down, they won't do it. So once they've published it, then you're stuck with your article having been published in a bad publication. If you look at the website, you can see that the design is poor. They'll have a variety of pictures, links that don't work. The journals tend to be very broad and cover many topics, but then they may only have few articles for each journal issue. And then their editorial board will be fake scholars. They may be a list of existing scholars who are not aware that they've been listed as being a board of this journal until later on. And when they find that out and ask that their name be removed, they can't get it removed. And it often happens that they'll copy the name or the design of an established journal. This is an example of an email that you might receive from a predatory journal. So you'll notice different aspects of the email. So you see that the address that it's from is Yahoo. If you see an email soliciting for a journal and the address is Yahoo, that is not a dependable source. Even if you get one from Gmail or Hotmail or so on. Then notice it says submissions open for 2019. And you see the word international there. That's a warning sign that it's pretty broad. And then notice also it says Cosmos. That is not a reputable metrics company, it says there. So remember when I said before, from the subject field, it says March of 2019. And it says the last day for submission is March 20th. It's the last day. And then the last day of publication is March 31st. So it's a really short timeline to submit an article. That's very abnormal. Also, you can see grammatical errors in the email that should alert you. Legitimate journals don't make grammar errors like that. Again, if it appears to be broad with many, many disciplines, that's a bad sign. Because ordinarily a journal would be more focused. It would focus to a specific field. So they might say something like social studies and humanities, society, religion, anthropology, and so on. You see quite a few wide-ranging topics. So that makes it very broad and alerts you to be suspicious. Another it says fast and easy paper publishing. Peer review takes months. To peer review a paper takes months. And it says inclusion in all major databases. That is a false statement. It's a false claim. And also, just because something is in a database does not make it reliable all of a sudden. Here's an example where them taking the name of a legitimate journal. So on the left side, you can see that they copied it. These are very similar. On the left is the real one, and on the right of the screen, and it's very similar in design, as you can see, and the name. Now, you may wonder, why do scholars receive this kind of email? And why now? Why are journals becoming more predatory? Well, journals are becoming more expensive. And that has led to an expansion of open access, that movement, the open access movement. So content is available for free, but sometimes there is a requirement that there would be a publication by the author. So predatory journals take advantage of this movement now, and they apply pressure on scholars who need to publish, especially young scholars who are just starting out in their field are susceptible. Now I'd like to talk about the impact of these journals. So they release scholarship with the impression that it has been reviewed, but it wasn't. So it floods the academic publishing market and reflects poorly on the publisher, the articles that were submitted. I will mention this one online incident. It's OMIC. In 2016, the US federal government, the Federal Trade Commission, filed a complaint, a legal complaint against them. And that was because they were deceptive and used unfair practices. So they were ordered to pay $50 million in fines. That's interesting because the president had been planning to appoint someone, and the person was criticized because they had published in a predatory journal. And so his name was dropped from consideration. And this group also hosted a fake convention. So they'll send an email that says, we have many successful speakers, people are arriving, and they see those well-known speakers' names, but they're not there. And instead, they use other speakers in their place, people who may not be as qualified as the well-known speaker. Or there may not even be a conference. Some people spend money to attend a conference. They'll reserve a hotel, plane fare, and everything, only to find out that the conference is not happening. So that's the problem that was a problem with this particular publisher. What you see here is the website. It looks professional, but you have to dig a little bit deeper and see what it is that they're trying to promote. On that web page, it talks about hosting a conference. When you see that, make sure that you check that it's a quality peer-reviewed process. And it should be posted on the website. If there's no information about that, about the peer review, that's a warning sign that it might not be a good journal. And you see that they're publishing against, again, very many different articles. So this particular company was owned by someone in India who also had an office in the States. And so that was how they were able to catch him. Now I'd like to talk a bit about the characteristics of reputable journals. They are published on a regular schedule. They have clear and easy to find statements about their peer review policies and procedures. The publication charges are known, as well as copyright. They also have digital archiving policy or a statement about that. So, and then the members of the publishing group are members of COPE, Committee on Publication Ethics. So, and I mentioned that once you've sent an article to a predatory journal, you're no longer able to remove it when you find out. So it sticks. It stays with you throughout your career. And sometimes predatory journals fold, and then you can't even find your article, which is good that it can't be found. But that's another example of the reason that predatory journals are not good, because they keep archives of these poor journals. When you're evaluating a journal, you need to think and check before you submit to a website. So there are a range of tools and resources that can help you do your research and identify a trusted journal. There's a checklist included in those tools so that you can evaluate different credentials of the publisher. So these are some of the evaluation tools listed here. You can use these to help you choose a good, reputable journal for publication. Also, I want to let you know that the website is called, hold on, I missed it. What's that? I apologize. Okay, thank you. Retraction. So to remove an article from a publication, if it's not reputable, there'll be bad data, false data, created data. So it's just amazing what you can find on these websites. I've seen some papers that from their appearance, they look good. They look professionally done, but they're not. The DOAJ website is helpful. It explains the reasons that journals have been removed from the list. On the right pane, you see a list of reasons for removal. And it says misconduct by the publisher. You should be aware that some of the databases, like the Web of Science, there are a few that are reputable, and then others will show up. And when we will eventually discover that they're not reputable. When you use Google Scholar, be careful, because you can find disreputable articles in Google Scholar search. Also, the Google tool, it's challenging to find valid resources. So some people will ask, how do you find a journal for publication? Well, there are different ways to find appropriate journals. Elsevier is a website where you can type in your keywords and match it to available journals. So keywords from your article. It will make suggestions for potential journals. Another one is Springer. And then it's called Jane, Journal Author Name Estimator. So there are ways for you to find good journals. And there are a couple of other links that you can look around through and find a good journal for your publication. This is an example of article finder. So you put in the title and the abstract and click on the search button, and that will bring up some recommended journals for that specific article. Also, there are disciplines, there should be associations who keep a list for that field of reputable journals, like the American Anthropological Society, the American Psychological Association, the MLA Directory of Journals. And we have databases in our library called Serials database, Serials Dictionary database. So that has, the exact type of journal that you're looking for. You can see what's out there. Also, some people will ask about Beals List, because remember, he was the one who started the list about potential predatory scholars. And he was criticized heavily because some of his judgments were not accurate. They were biased of open access articles. So recall that some open access journals are good and reputable. So keep that in mind. In 2017, the list was taken down, Beals List was taken down. And then in 2019, it was continued by an anonymous contributor. So Beal was sued for doing this kind of work and eventually retired. He retired from the profession of librarian. But he did raise some important points that are worth thinking about. So he did serve to increase awareness about predatory publication practices. He was also biased against non-Western countries in particular. There's an information guide available here. You can see there's also a recording of presentations on this website. You can find presentations recorded, and then there are also announcements for future presenters that are planned. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and I'll see if anyone has any questions.
If you want to put in the chat that you have a question, I will go ahead then and call on people in the order of the chat so that Joan can answer those questions.
Were you surprised by anything that you learned today? I'm wondering who's in the audience. Are you graduate students, faculty, staff? Liz says, currently I'm staff and also a PhD student. Liz, I remember when you contacted me for assistance before. Right, I wanted to learn more. How's your PhD work coming along? Liz says, well, I'm in my first year, so it's still quite early on in the process. There's a lot of thinking to build my research and also to recognize predatory publication. So I have published in the past, but it was published at in a scholarship journal, but I have received many emails from just different journals. And at first I thought, hey, this is cool. They're finding out about my work. And later, as I looked into them, I realized that these were not legitimate. But there was one that almost got me. It was an invitation to add a chapter to a book, to write a chapter for a book. And I had not done my homework about that, so I started working on it. But then I was wanting some information up front from them, and it was very difficult to get answers from them. So that was what told me, hold up, wait a moment. And then they told me of the charge that I would need to pay in order to be published. And I knew, no, I've published before and I've never been asked to pay a fee. So I just said, no, thanks, bye-bye, and shut it down. So, but that was a near miss. I believe it was like InTech Open Access or something it was called. I'd have to look at the list. But I should have looked to see if they were on that list. Joan says it's a good thing that you caught that. I'm concerned primarily with younger scholars who are just starting out in their careers, and there's the pressure to publish, and they might fall into that trap. Liz says, well, if it's too good to be true, that has to alert you to take caution. You wouldn't expect them to be pursuing you, or nearly you have to pursue them. You have to persuade them to publish your work. It's not the other way around. Joan says, yes, and also I want to let everybody know that RIT's library has a department that publishes open access journals. So if you want to submit an article and it fits into their journal, you can do that. Or you can start a new journal and have that conversation. That department also helps you with open access books. And we have someone at NTID published a book about chemistry instruction for deaf students. I missed the name. Yeah, it was organic chemistry. It was, the book was Reactivity in Organic Chemistry. So is that the one? So, how can you know that open access is okay in one case, but not in another? How can you distinguish between open access publishers? Distinguish, what was your question, Liz? I missed it. I was saying for open access, I understand you saying that some of them are good, meaning legitimate, and then others are predatory. So how can you identify the difference between the two? In my PowerPoint, it reviews some of the issues that you're looking for, Liz, in a publishing journal that are reputable. But you're looking for a clear policy of peer review and a process. And look at the website and notice their design. See if there are any grammatical errors. You would not expect to find any. And look at the type of content that's included. So the same idea, it shouldn't be too broad. It should be field related. So it should be specific. And yes, check the list, check the website that you use, and use your judgment about that journal. But also, for sure, though, you can contact the library and we can work with you to investigate. Well, if there are no other questions, then I'll finish the recording and post this if you want to review it again. And thank you to everyone who came. So I'll stop the recording now. Bye-bye.